Hello, and welcome to 3D Vision Technology's 10-4 Tech Talk, a monthly introduction to engineering technology that can make your company better, faster, and smarter. I'm Todd Majewski, your host for today. Today's topic is common uses for 3D printing in medical applications. Our guest speaker is Jeremy Marvin, application engineer for 3D printing. Jeremy works out of our Cincinnati, Ohio office and has been with 3D Vision for over 5 years. Good morning, Jeremy.
Good morning, Todd. Thanks for having me.
So, Jeremy, before we get started, I'd like to tell our listeners a little bit about you. So before you came to 3D Vision, you worked in manufacturing and design for many years. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Sure. Right out of school, I started out as a co-op, like a lot of engineers do these days. And in the paper industry, we did some custom machinery, some custom products for that market. And then I moved into a different company as a process engineer. Still doing machine design, very large, heavy industrial machines. And, I spent, time at the computer doing the design work. I spent time on the shop floor when issues arose, either doing assembly or doing manufacturing. So I've got 19 years under my belt on industrial experience.
So really a problem solver.
I would think so, yes.
Yeah, got it. Okay, so now that you've been with 3D Vision and you're on the 3D printing side of the business, tell me, what does an application engineer do?
So as an application engineer, the big thing that I do is, visiting customers with our sales team. So we've got sales people in Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, and Kentucky. And so right now I'm the sole 3D printing AE, and we visit customers, and, everybody's excited about 3D printing. They're excited about this, but how do they fit it in? And then, how do we pay for it? So I'm looking for those issues, those problems, and then maybe matching that with the solution that we might have.
All right, so you're finding the right application in printing for a specific customer problem.
Yep. And then as part of that, we'll do a proof of concept that we call benchmarks. We actually deliver a part to the customer so they can see it, and then they can compare that traditional versus a 3D printing.
Yeah, so the old way to the new way.
The old way to the new way, yes, sir.
All right, well, sounds like that's going to be part of our topic today. So why don't you talk a little bit about the topic of this presentation?
So we're going to see some common uses, getting right into the presentation. We're going to see some common uses of 3D printing in the medical industry, specifically 3 key areas that we kind of focused on. Number one is hospitals, seeing how doctors and surgeons and other members of their team are incorporating 3D printing into helping save patients' lives, improving the outcomes of surgeries. We're also going to be taking a look at design and manufacturing. Maybe it's a medical device manufacturer, seeing how 3D printing is helping with prototyping, improving time to market and reducing costs. And then we'll close out with orthotics and prosthetics. We'll see how going back to that new way, old way, new way mentality is seeing, where we were at in history and seeing where that's going to end up in the future.
So most of your presentations are really examples of how in these 3 areas. I know that design and manufacturing has been using 3D printing, for a long time, but you're probably going to show us some new exciting ways that they're using.
Some new ways, exactly. And then before we get going, I do have a poll question for you. All right, so do you know somebody that's ever had a potentially life-threatening surgery? Now, either that's yourself or a loved one, like a grandfather or a close relative, so close friends?
Yeah, I'm sure we're going to get a lot of yeses on this one. Almost everyone knows somebody.
Yeah, I was just thinking back to my own childhood. I had grandfathers that were in the hospital a lot. As they age, it seems like you're there more and more and more.
Sure. So let's take a look at our results on this. Yeah, just as we expected. A lot of people know someone who's been in surgery that could have been life-threatening. Now we're not talking like shoulder surgery or knee or orthopedic type work.
But
this is life-threatening.
Life-threatening. Yeah. And just a quick number for you. In North America, 1 out of 6 surgeries results in some sort of complication.
Oh my gosh, you're kidding me.
So yeah, on average, that more than doubles the cost of that surgery.
So the complication doubles the cost. So if and any life-threatening surgery is usually in that 50, 100,000, even sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars when you're dealing with life-threatening surgery. So
1 out of 6. Keep that number in mind.
That's amazing.
All right, so focusing on hospitals for the time being, kind of the old way, new way. So, a couple decades ago, when X-rays first came about, we were talking about a flat two-dimensional image. All right, and doctors could look at that. They could kind of plan out. It was an educated guess when they were planning for the surgery. And it's almost like if you think about trying to solve a Rubik's Cube by looking at its image. It's very flat. There's not much you can do with it.
Yeah, there's not a lot of problem solving looking at the 2D, right?
Exactly. So step forward a few years and MRIs and CT scans come out. And we're still looking at a flat 2D image, but now we're looking at a stack of images. So we can actually go to a specific depth and look at the cross section.
Yeah, it gives you a little more insight to what's going on. Yeah, that's old way, new way, and that's traditional. I've had CT scans many times. Yeah.
Yep. And so now we're able to take that same CAT scan data, that same CT scan data, and do customer organs, customer part or patient parts. And the models that we're printing is true to that patient. Nobody's built the same. Everybody's different. You can hold it in your hand. You move it around. You can solve that Rubik's Cube by looking at it from all the angles.
So you're taking, now that you don't have to have a new scan, you're just taking the existing MRI, CT scans, and then stacking them together, making a 3D model.
A 3D, almost like a CAD model.
And then just printing it out.
And just bring it out. So this allows, having that model in your hands, it allows you to plan your approach. All right. It allows you to look at it, to maybe get your team on board, practice the procedure. We can actually print in different feelings, different tactile feelings. So people that are using the surgical tools can try it out and feel it before they actually go in there. If I ever have my chest opened up for whatever reason, my doctor's going to have like 10 models in my heart before he goes in there. All right. This will allow him to determine possible complications, rule out certain treatments or certain ways of going about it, and then to better communicate with this medical team and to educate the patients. In a study of reconstructive surgeries, the use of 3D models to plan or practice was shown to reduce operating time by 18%.
Wow.
18%.
That's huge.
Yeah, that's.
So there's hospitals using this now.
Lots of hospitals.
Okay.
And we actually have a couple of stories about that. So this is regarding Mia, who was born with a congenital heart defect. And actually, the name of her defect was so long, I couldn't fit it on the PowerPoint slide. Okay.
Wow.
So her doctors, they said that she was inoperable. So whatever was wrong with her heart was eventually going to kill her unless they were able to fix it. So
that's news no parent ever wants to hear.
Oh, yeah. I've got two little ones, and I would hate to hear this. So the doctor, if you read the story, the doctor put that prognosis in his briefcase, and he carried that with him. So every time he opened up his briefcase, he saw that until it came to him, let's try 3D printing. So they printed out her heart from the CAT scan data and planned the safest approach. They made a smaller incision and were able to produce or do the surgery in 2 hours shorter time period than it normally would have taken. And it accelerated her recovery, and she's alive today because of 3D printing.
So what's that she has in her heart or in her hand?
That is her heart. So
that's the 3D model that the doctor used to
save her life.
Save her life. Fantastic.
Yep. And you guys are interested, over on the side, we'll have a link to download the white paper on that. Feel free to grab that as they pop up.
I think there's a video too on her. Is that correct or no?
This one might have a video, but you might have to dig for it. If you search YouTube for Mia's heart at Nicholas Children's Hospital, you'll find it.
Right. Okay.
And then we'll try to make it on our webpage available to you guys.
All right, got it.
All right. So another story. A little older person is Teresa, and she had an aneurysm. And in this case, they held the aneurysm, and she's got it in her hand. They held it in her hand. They actually did the procedure on it several times, trying to find that best way. It determined the potential complications. And again, an inoperable person becomes operable.
Wow, this is definitely an old way, new way of doing surgery. I mean, this is phenomenal because now hospitals have the ability to actually look at a patient's problem in their hand and come up with basically guides and assistance to figure out what's the best course of action.
Right. And in this case, this hospital, and you had asked about hospitals already printing, these people have been doing it for 4 years. And what they've learned, the best thing that they're getting out of this is that how not to do a surgery. Wow. So they'll try it out several times and they'll learn, well, I can't do it this way. I can't do it this way. Oh, this is the way that works. This is the way it's going to save their life.
Wow.
Okay. And we have another poll coming up pretty quickly. So just a quick guess. So we've talked about 3D printing is already in the medical industry. People are already using it. And your best guess, and this is just a guess, we're not going to hold you accountable to it, is how much has this grown in the last year? 2015 and 2016, 2017 data is not out yet. So in the year 2015 to 2016.
So I'm not expecting our audience to know, but I'm thinking this is going to be their opinion. How much has this grown in hospitals, right? That's
hospitals,
really,
yep. Medical models only, how much has it grown?
So let's take a look at the results on this one. And it looks like everyone's best guess, they're thinking it's probably growing 50 to 100%.
So
what's the answer?
Well, I want to tell you my guess. My guess when I heard this number was 88. I said, all right, 88%. So, and actually, it's the bottom, over 100%. And truthfully, it's 306% growth in that 1 year time period.
So hospitals are recognizing the need to do this to help reduce costs, right? And save lives.
Saving lives is the big deal.
Wow. Those are great examples of how hospitals are using 3D printing, which is the old way, now new way.
Yep. All right, so another section, so we talked about hospitals. This is traditional manufacturing. So taking a look at, if you think about a doctor or a surgeon, and they're very particular on how the device feels in their hand, or ergonomics, we'll call that. Right. So they would outsource probably this design, like give me a bunch of models where I can test and feel how I like it. You don't want a surgeon cramping up in a surgery at the last 11th hour. We got to make it all that 12 hours of that surgery. So they'll go through several iterations. They'll choose a couple that they like, and they'll do several prototypes of that. And once they got the feel for it, it's going to work right, it's going to function right, then they'll actually cut steel tooling and then mass produce it. It actually takes about 8 years for a medical device to get to market at the cost of tens to hundreds of millions of dollars to go through clinical trials, to go through government approvals. And if you get to the end and you don't get that approval or something goes wrong, that money's gone.
Wow. So you better get it right.
Yeah. The importance of having the design right early is critical.
Sure.
And this is where 3D printing can really help out. So this is Wong University. I believe they're in China, and they were producing, and actually let's look at a poll first. So when designing or when investing in your processes, what's your biggest concerns? When you're investing, what are your biggest concerns to spend money on your processes? Whether it's reducing costs, everybody wants to do their job in less money, with less money. Maybe increase time to market.
Yeah, I would expect time to market is going to be important, but man, to me, they all are important, but I'm wondering which one might be the most important.
Yeah, maybe several design iterations. All right, so looking at the answer, all of the above was kind of the
clear winner,
clear winner, but design iterations and confidentiality are right there. As half of it is design iterations and confidentiality, and maybe design iterations is, as you're doing a new product, maybe you're not redesigning every part. Maybe you're doing just a couple of those major components, but more iterations give you the ability to do more of it.
Yeah, we've been doing this for a long time, Jeremy, and I know that a lot of customers that have been buying our 3D printing technology want to keep it confidential, and they don't, they outsource a lot of tasks, and keeping it in-house is very important.
Okay, so getting back to Wollongong University in China, they are producing medical model, or actually medical tooling for medical device manufacturers and biocompatible materials. So what they found by incorporating 3D printing, that they can reduce the cost of that, like fixturing, we'll say, by 30 to 50%. And they're able to do it 90% faster. So take that 2-week delivery down to a 1-day delivery.
I see the bullet of design freedom. Can you expand on that? What do you mean by design freedom?
Design freedom is not being bound by design for manufacturing. So we had to allow areas for machine tooling heads and bits to get to, and maybe we had to separate certain areas to make it even machinable. All right, we don't have that limitation with 3D printing. We can print anything. All right, we can't manufacture everything.
Got it. Okay.
All right, so we have digital inventory. So we're not mass producing the part, we're not putting it on the shelf and using it. We're revising, we're replacing, and replicating that as needed.
Got it. So you're building it as you need it versus making 100 and then inventorying it.
Just in time is making its way to medical.
Old way, new way. Got it.
Okay. So this story is about diversified plastics. They are a contract tool maker, so they specialize in injection molding. And specifically, their biggest client base is in the medical device industry. So if they had a customer come to them and say, I need a prototype of my part, they would cut a mold out of aluminum or a very inexpensive tool steel. So their turnaround time on that's about 5 weeks, and at their cost about $13,000. Right? So once they incorporated 3D printing, that took, they realized a cost savings of 88% and a time savings of about 80%.
Wow, that's incredible. So they are making short-run tooling, or is this can do lots of parts, small amount of parts?
No, either short run or their big story was the prototype. They couldn't get a prototype cheaply or very inexpensively. It was always a long lead time, and it was always very expensive for just a handful of parts. Okay. Have one more customer story in this section, and this is about Assist Medical. All right, so in their case, they needed a cost-effective way to manufacture for either clinical trials or pilot commercial production. Now, looking over at this little device over here on the side, the housing around the screen is actually 3D printed in the end product. So they didn't need a large quantity. They just needed the couple dozen that they needed to get out in the field. All right, so that's there. It eliminated so much tooling. We talked about the molds costing tens of thousands of dollars. The mold to make that's pretty insane. They eliminated all that tooling, and then people could see going from prototype to final production much quicker, producing organic shapes, complex geometry, and the design freedom. We don't have to have draft anymore. We don't have to have the certain wall thicknesses just to allow it to inject correctly.
Right, and then the shrinkage and all the things that come with that. Yep.
So the ability to produce the part any way we want without having those limitations, or maybe it can't be manufactured any other way.
So do you help your customers with that type of, how to design for 3D printing?
We touch on it. So we have a class that we teach called Insight, so the software that runs 3D printers, and we go over a lot of tips and tricks. And if a customer called me up and say, Jeremy, I want to reduce my time on this, or I need it quicker, how can I do that? There's a few tricks we can do, and I'll definitely help out a customer in need.
Great, thank you.
Okay. So
all right, do we have a poll? Okay. All right.
So it's not just manufacturing devices and medical devices. We also have, think about orthotics and prosthetics. We mentioned this is one of our key areas we're going to focus on. So again, a new way, an old way, new way. And I went out to the internet and I found this image, and it just blew my mind that they did this back in the 1900s. And it's actually, old iron. So think about a blacksmith hammering away at this. Once the bottom of the foot was done, they would, it looks like they used spikes to hold it into a wooden base. Maybe they wrapped this, get some really extreme comfort and wrap it in leather and maybe put, I don't know, but it didn't look very comfortable. The bottom doesn't flex. It's very rigid. The guy probably walked with the limp.
I'm sure that was high tech back then.
Very high tech. Anything a blacksmith did was probably the height of technology. So fast forward a couple decades, and today that the partial limb was coated in plaster of Paris, and we had to create a mold. So it's custom fit, sort of. If it was an injury, we had to wait a few weeks, 5-6 weeks, for the swelling to even go down. So you're sitting until that happens. You're going in. The stuff is the plaster of Paris. It gets hot when it sets. It's uncomfortable, probably itchy. And then they wrap it up. You wait for it to cure, and then they send it off to where they manufacture it. Basically, they're taking their standard knee down and making it match up to the partial limb that's left. Right? So that traditional method with using the plaster of Paris can cost upwards of about $40,000. Right, so let's bring 3D printing. So, we talked about design freedom, being able to design, maybe not for, we can always have the function, but making it look good, making it look artistic, improving that fit, form, and function. We're not going to use the plaster of Paris anymore. We're going to take a 3D scan, a 3D image, get that exact detail down to the thou, down to thousandths of an inch, the accuracy that we can see.
So if there's any imperfection, it's picked up right away.
It's picked up. It's going to fit perfectly. Better than a glove. We're going to eliminate material inside or outside, maybe for non-stress areas. The more material we reduce, we're reducing weight, we're reducing the cost. We can vary the thickness for comfort. We can put the strengths where it needs to go.
Yeah, I'm looking at that orthotic. That looks like the one, something similar to my father has, because he's had hip surgery and he lost the ability to lift his feet, his toes, so he's got what's called a drop foot, and he has to wear one of those, but it doesn't look anything like that. It's certainly not custom, and he can only wear it certain times of the day. It's very uncomfortable. He can't get his shoes on really well. So there's a lot of problems with the standard or old way of products being used out there today.
So he's watching TV and he wants to get up to get a Coke. He's got to put on this device to walk.
Or he has to walk very carefully, not to trip, right? Because that's what it's eliminating, is the ability to stub your toe, stub your foot on the carpet or the floor.
Gotcha. We could actually incorporate a little toe stubbing device.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful.
All right, so our first story in the prosthetics and orthotics is Emma, and if you guys need a good cry, grab your Kleenexes, because this is a heart-wrenching story. She was born with AMC. I'm not going to try to pronounce that one. I actually was able to get that one to fit on the slide, and this disease was causing a very, very high amount of stiff joints, which prevented her muscles from fully developing. So she couldn't lift her arms, she couldn't move, she couldn't lift her head. She was in surgery or in casts for, the first 2 years of her life. Wow. So her parents went to a medical show. They saw a device for adults, but they didn't make one for kids. So they approached the hospital.
Oh, you mean an exoskeleton?
Yeah, the exoskeleton, or the device, the medical device that she has. And we want to do this for our daughter. So nobody did it because you couldn't plan for, or it needed to grow with the kid. So they had to really think about the design and how to make this work. How can I shrink down those devices and make it growable and almost, piece parts like Legos, so you can put it together when they need to. And when the part breaks, they can break it. So they printed it. And now, this lets her play. She can move her body. We have a little white paper that'll be available for you guys. There'll be a link to a video somewhere in there, but watch your story. It's an awesome story.
That's incredible. Yeah. Give me that Kleenex, by the way.
Okay. All right. So our last story of the day is Alex. So Alex was born with just a portion of his right arm, and he received a first 3D printed prosthetic in 2014, and it was early. 2014. That's 3 years ago. That's pretty early on. So as time progressed and he needed a new one, the company Limitless Solutions created a new one for him. And they if you look at it there in the picture, you can kind of see it's a little bit like Iron Man. And Robert Downey Jr. showed up in costume, in character as Tony Stark, this guy's hero, to deliver this hand, and turned out really well for him. So as far as I know, he's still wearing it. But that new 3D printed prosthetic is saving, as far as savings goes, 99.5% saved based a traditionally made prosthetic.
Wow, that's huge. So because it's 3D printed parts and all the parts are lower cost and compared to an original, I'm sure compared to Tony Stark's arm, it's a lot cheaper, but that's amazing savings.
Yep. So the company actually open sourced the design. So if you know somebody that needs one, you can go print one. You can donate one if you wanted to.
Wow. I love to hear that more of that story. I'm going to check out that website.
Sure, and that's limitlesssolutions.org. All right, so just some conclusions to take away from our presentation. So hospitals are using 3D printing today and have been doing it for a couple of years to improve patient outcomes, saving people's lives. They're holding that heart, holding whatever organ, true to the customer, true to the patient, that actual patient's anatomy. We saw how device manufacturers are improving speed to market, improving quality, and reducing that tooling cost. And then the last thing we touched on was the orthopedic and orthotics and prosthetics, and how the development of that is being revolutionized with 3D printing.
There's a lot of different areas. Why don't we jump into our Q&A session, and let's see if we've got some questions that we can kind of cover for our customers. Looks like there's a question coming in, and it says, do you have any metal parts? That's a great question, and what I think we want to do is maybe tell our audience that you did a presentation how to build metal parts without a metal printer.
Yep.
And when was that? About maybe 6 months ago. So what we should do is send a link to that client and show them the video, and they could watch a tech talk we did on how to make metal parts without a metal printer, using a plastic printer and then doing some other processes to make a metal part. So that might be good for him. Here's a second question. I can't afford a 3D printer. How can I help my patients? Maybe you can take that one, Jeremy.
So if I had to have this, if I was very passionate about printing and I couldn't pay for the printer, I would probably outsource the building of those parts to service bureaus. As long as I had the CAT scan, the MRI data, I could send that off and I could have it printed. And we have a couple of local service providers that could do that, us included in that. We could help you build that ROI.
Right. So I guess if you can't afford the printer, yeah, you certainly could just have a part built, which is a very easy methodology. All right, let's see if we have any other questions here. And I think we hit all of them. That sounds good. Okay. Well, you know what? Thank you for the 30 minutes, audience. And Jeremy, I thank you for all the information. Some of those stories were fantastic. I want to tell everyone that's listening that we are recording this session, and we'll send you an image or a link to the video. And I want to make sure everyone knows that. Also, if you want to share that with colleagues and friends, feel free to do that. Thank you again, everyone, for coming. I appreciate your time. And don't forget to come join us next month at our 10-4 Tech Talk, where we're going to talk about SolidWorks World 2017 recap. I appreciate it, Jeremy. Thank you for your time. And goodbye, everyone, and have a productive day.